Good evening and welcome to our November London South East Investor Relations webinar. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Donald Leggett, Head of Investor Relations at London South East, and as ever, I'm your host for this evening. We're delighted to be joined by four CEOs who will present and take questions afterwards. And tonight, we have a life sciences double header for you with Susie Dilly, CEO at the early stage cancer therapeutics business ValiRx. She's going to present and take questions first. And then staying in London, we hear from Jeremy Skillington, CEO at infectious diseases pharmaceutical company Poolbeg Pharma. The second half of our evening is more about mining. We're joined from the States by William Sheriff, Executive Chair at the Uranium In Situ Recovery Specialist enCore Energy. Then we cross to Johannesburg, where we talk to Werner Klingenberg, and he's the CEO of mining services company Goldplat. Each presenter has, as ever, 30 minutes in total to make their investment case, with 20 minutes talking to slides before we take your questions and put them to the speakers. And if you want to buy stocks listed on the Canadian Stock Exchange like enCore Energy or any of our excellent previous Canadian miners, then the interactive investor trading platform allows you to trade Canadian listed TSX and TSXV stocks. Finally, a date for the diary. We do this all over again on Tuesday, December the 6th, for the last time this year, when we bring you another four excellent companies, each ready to make their investment pitch. Okay, time to hear from tonight's CEOs. AIM-listed ValiRx is a life sciences company focused on early-stage cancer therapeutics and women's health. It recently created a subsidiary called Citalytics, which has signed an IP license agreement with a highly respected King's College London. 60% owns Citalytics will take a potential breast cancer treatment called CLX-001 through preclinical trials. Also, as many of you know, ValiRx is waiting for Theorem RX to raise funds in order to license VAL-201 for oncology purposes. Susie Dilly, CEO, joins us live to explain all in more detail. Welcome, Susie.
Thank you, Donald. Good evening. I was worried how I was going to fit the presentation into 20 minutes, but I think you've covered most of it in the 2-minute introduction there, so thank you.
I know, I've hogged your glory, Susie.
So it saved me a job. It's easy when the introducer does all the work for you.
Okay, I'm sure you're just being kind. Over to you. Let's see what the real company story is.
Thank you. So, as Donald has mentioned, tonight we are introducing Citalytics. So this is our new subsidiary company recently set up with King's College London. But before we go any further, the first thing I have to do is to just highlight the disclaimer to you. So this presentation will be available in PDF form on our website afterwards, as well as hopefully a link to the recording at the end of the presentation evening. But we do just have to highlight the disclaimer. Please do your own research. Don't rely solely on the information given in this presentation in order to make a decision about any investment. But moving that aside and getting on to the more exciting things, hopefully there are a few members of this audience who have seen things from us before. But if you haven't, do feel free to look on our website to see presentations that we've given in the past. Because actually, we're not going to go over too much of the old stuff today. We're going to focus on the new company, on the new science behind the new company, and just briefly touch on some of the other things that have been going on within the company over the last few months, and in fact, the last year. We have been very busy, and you can see from the at a glance slide, which is designed to give a summary of everything we're doing. We did complete the fundraise in the summer. So at the end of June, we did raise 2.5 million. So thank you to everyone who participated in that. We do have 2 programs that are currently undergoing out licensing. So these are programs that have been taken through into clinical testing. That isn't our intention anymore to take programs into clinical testing. We are focused solely on in order to reduce that cash burn, diversify the portfolio, and to make sure that we have plenty of new early stage pipeline projects coming through. Those pipeline projects that we bring through are focused on oncology and women's health. Now, we do find that there's a lot more out there for innovative science in oncology than there is in women's health at the moment. And that's really why we are focusing on both of these two areas, because we want to change that. We want to make sure that women's health is brought to the forefront of biotech companies' minds, and that tools are created and used and made available to help push women's health projects forwards. I will be talking about our evaluation projects. I'm not going to be talking so much about our TCRO strategy. That's our Translational Contract Research Organisation idea. If you want to know more about that, please have a look at some of our presentations that we've given over the last 6 months. But just as a very brief line on that, we believe that there is a gap in translational services, so taking projects from those early preclinical stages out of universities, translating them into industry, and then making them ready for that translation from preclinical to clinical. Now, that's what we're doing with our assets, but we want to make sure that if we find good technologies that enable us to do that, we can also offer those as a service to bring in revenues for us, but also to enable more good science to happen in other companies and not just ValiRx. But the focus for today, as we've already said, is cytolytics. So cytolytics is formed, the name is formed exactly for the science. So cyto meaning cell and lytics meaning breaking apart. This is a molecule, a drug candidate that can break apart cancer cells in order to treat patients who are suffering from that cancer. So I will go into a little bit more detail about the science in a little bit, but that's just to give you the headlines. So who are we? We're ValiRx. Again, if you want to know more about all of us, please look on our website and at past presentations. But particularly to highlight here are two brand new members of staff taken on since the AGM. We have Stella Panu coming onto the board as a non-exec director, in replacement for Kevin Alexander, who chose not to stand for re-election at the AGM. Stella has come in with her vast experience of institutional investment and her network of contacts that will help us to be able to build that more sophisticated shareholder base that we are hoping to build. And really excitingly, we have Kathy coming in as Chief Scientific Officer. Now, she is interim Chief Scientific Officer at the moment. I'm hoping that that's not going to stay that way forever, but she brings her experience of really extensive experience of translational science. She's worked in universities, top class universities. She's worked in big pharma, GSK, Takeda, for example, and she's worked in small biotechs. And specifically what she's been doing there is taking early stage innovation and bringing it through just exactly how we do. So this is really a brilliant match, and I've enjoyed the last few months working with her. I intend to enjoy a lot more of that. So where are we at the moment? Well, we have a new pipeline picture to share today. This is the first time anyone's seen this. We have the green line at the top for cytolytics being our new program that's come in. It's gone through our evaluation stage where we first take projects from universities and we test them for about a year first to make sure they really do what we want them to do. And we found that CLX-001 did do exactly what we wanted and didn't do anything that we didn't want it to do. So we formed that subsidiary, Cytolytics, and that is now looking to move into more formal preclinical development. The other programs that we have on here, the two evaluation agreements, Hokkaido University project and Barcelona University project, those are both still undergoing evaluation. Hokkaido University, that evaluation period runs out in December, so we'll be providing an update before then to see exactly where we are going with that project. And with Barcelona, that update will be provided before the year is up in February next year. The VAL301 and BC201 programs are in preclinical development at the moment. So I'm not going to be focusing on those today, but when there is new science coming out of that, we will share it with you. And then finally, just touching on the two legacy assets, the prostate cancer and the lung pancreatic cancer projects, they are looking for, but 401 is actively looking for a partner. It is in an intensive business development phase at the moment. And VAL201, of course, has the exclusivity agreement under the letter of intent with TheoremRx. So hopefully that should be resolved soon too. Now, just very briefly touching on where we operate in the drug development cycle, this 20 years represents the 20-year patent life. we focus just on that bit at the beginning, that preclinical section. But we always put this slide up just to remind people that it's really important to get every stage right, because every extra month we take now, even back at preclinical, impacts the amount of time that the eventual commercialization partner gets to sell the product. So it makes the product that bit more expensive if we can't get it right at the beginning. And what we are looking to do when we take the early stage academic research and progress it to the point where it's ready to go into clinical trials, we have to get it over this valley of death. We have to make this bridge. And this is just a reminder of all those things that we need to do in order to get it across that valley. So cytolytics is just at that stage now where we can start filling in some of these gaps. And I'll talk you through in a minute exactly which of those gaps we still have to fill, which actually is most of them, because we are right at the beginning of the process with this one. But now changing the scene a little bit, changing the background colors, and on cytolytics, the new green slides for the new company, CLX001. This is a summary of everything here, but I will go through these points in separate slides to get a bit more detail in just a moment. But as I mentioned earlier, the idea of CLX001 is that it can smash cells to pieces in order to beat the cancer. And most importantly, it can do that without the need for any specific cancer cell markers, any receptors or surface markers. And it does this by recognizing the tumor microenvironment. So it's an ionic interaction that's been optimized specifically to only have this effect on the cell membranes when it's in a cancerous microenvironment. So this is absolutely brilliant science. This has been developed by Martin Umschneider at King's. We have his research paper. There's a link to it available on our website if you want to read more of the science detail, but I will walk you through a little bit more of it in a moment. So just to think first about what cancers this could be useful for. Now, as it doesn't need a particular cell receptor or surface characteristic other than this tumor microenvironment to act, this could be applied to a lot of different cancer types. Now, we are looking at solid tumor types. It is specific to the solid tumor type that we get the right microenvironment for it. But we've started with this, as Martin Umschneider recommended, with triple-negative breast cancer. This is very well recognized as one of the more aggressive forms of breast cancer, and it is pretty much the hardest form of breast cancer to treat, specifically because it is triple-negative. It doesn't have estrogen receptors, it doesn't have progesterone receptors, and it doesn't have HER2 receptors. That's where the name comes from. It sounds a bit obvious, but you need something like CLX001 to come in and be able to smash that cell to pieces, even though there's no cell surface receptor there. So what's really important about this is that although triple-negative breast cancer can be diagnosed as such as soon as a patient is diagnosed with breast cancer, it's actually also something that can happen on relapse. So if a patient is treated by targeting one of these receptor types in the early stages of their disease, they may have a number of years of cancer-free time, but then when the cancer comes back, they can find that it's come back with a different phenotype. And that could mean that it comes back without the receptors because it's become tolerant to those treatments, and those receptors are no longer expressed on the surface. So it is a really important target. And just as importantly, because we can treat without knowing which receptors are there, it opens the door for people to be treated without this type of testing first. So if the testing isn't available to find out what tumor type you've got, you could treat with CLX001 anyway, because it doesn't rely on those markers. So it is a massive unmet medical need. And it is really exciting to have a potential solution to this problem. But looking a little bit more at the drug candidate itself. So this is a peptide. Peptides are something that I have some familiarity with. So it really is absolutely within my sweet spot for what I like to develop. And I know that there will be a couple of members of the audience chuckling at that because I do keep coming back to peptides. But this is a synthetic peptide, so it is a chemical entity, not a biologic. It is 15 amino acids long. and they are all naturally occurring amino acids. Now, what this means is that it is quite straightforward to manufacture, and there shouldn't be any massive surprises in it, because it's the sort of compound that's recognized by the body as being something that should be there, not something that needs to be immediately thrown out. So King's did look at how to optimize this, how to get the best anti-cancer activity out of it. And they had 3 positions in particular that they varied in order to screen 36 peptides, so a decent number to get the best candidate. And that was EEK, so that was the 3 positions, where 2 E's and a K, and there are some backup compounds if there was a problem with this, but there is no suggestion at the moment that we should need those. But importantly, this is a slide to demonstrate to us how it works. Now, there is a presentation on our website of Martin Olmschneider actually presenting this science that he carried out. So if you want to see more of the technical science details, I really recommend you watch that, because there's nothing better than seeing science presented by the people who actually did it in the first place. But to get my take on this, you can see the peptide molecule coming in at the top on column A. And this is representing really that the peptide is presented to the cancer cell. There's a few of these peptides floating around. And as they have that ionic recognition on the cancer cell membrane, you can see a few of these peptides gathering together as more of them get collected in this particular microenvironment. And when that happens, when you get a few of them together, you start seeing them perforate the cell membrane. They come together in order to perforate it. And when that perforation has gone all the way through the membrane, you get the aqueous pores forming. And that's what causes the cell to be smashed to pieces. That's what makes the contents of the cell come out. And that's really how it works. So hopefully that explains with a reasonable selection of pictures, so that we can see exactly how it's going to work. And this does also offer opportunities for combination as well, because you've got cancer cell contents floating around for the body to recognize and pick up if it's encouraged to do so. Or you've also got huge great holes in the side of cancer cells that other drugs can get in through. So there are a lot of opportunities around this. But looking now at what we've got to do and what we've already got here at the moment. Now, there are already in vivo assays, so mouse models, that show that tumours can be completely eradicated after treatment with CLX-001. And this is where it has been published in Martin Olmschneider's paper. So this is absolutely great data, but we do need to build on that. We need to look at different tumour types. We need to look at slightly different formulations as well. But the fact that even after a first look from the academic, these mice remain tumour-free for 200 days. And if you look at the length of time a mouse usually lives for, that is absolutely remarkable that they got that data off such a one-shot experiment. But also the in vitro assays, so this is cell line-based assays, where both ourselves in our evaluation agreement and work that was done previously by King's shows both ovarian and breast cancer cells responding really well. And this isn't just in traditional cancer cell lines that might have been in a freezer for months. This is in patient-derived cell lines as well. So this is in PDX models. So this is really great. We have done a little bit of extra toxicology as well, a little bit of immunogenicity testing just to make sure, because it's a peptide and it's in an interesting nano formulation, we had to make sure that there wasn't anything unusual happening with that. But we do have a lot more work to do. Firstly, we do need to optimize the nano formulation. At the moment, it works absolutely fine on a lab bench and on a scale for a university, but we need to get that into an industrial process. And that's really an important part of what ValiRx wants to do with early stage programs, is to take them from academic work and industrialize them. So that is exactly what we're doing here. And then once we have the new formulation, we'll be able to look at optimizing the dose schedules and looking at a whole range of different tumours in these models and going through the formal preclinical assessment so that we can bring that through and get that ready to go into clinical trials with a partner who will take it into clinical development for us. So this is really exciting, but it is a very, very early stage project for us. And it's one of the reasons why we have been looking at the translational contract research organization concept, because at the stage this is at the moment, it would be really great to put this into our own lab and to actually have that complete control and complete freedom of ideas to experiment in our own lab with that. So we are still looking for ideas on how to do that, whether acquiring a fully functioning company that already has revenues, or even setting up a small lab of our own in order to carry out this type of work, with potential to also offer services out as appropriate. But I'm going to stop talking now because I can see that Donald has questions to ask me. But if there isn't anything that I've covered, or if there's anything that I haven't covered tonight, or you don't get your questions in, please feel free to email me or any of the team using the email addresses shown here.
Okay, fantastic, Susie. That was absolutely brilliant. What a brilliant summary. And 1 minute early, 19 minutes. You're a complete star. I'm gonna give you an easy, unchallenging start. James M says, not really a question for ValiRx. He just wants to give you feedback that as shareholders, we're all really excited about Cytolytics CLX001. And congratulations on the deal with Kings, the new direction. He likes the new direction, and the newly appointed team members. Looking forward to future success.
That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much, James.
I do this a lot, and most people don't actually. They're not actually so kind. So I take it basically.
No, I think this shareholder excitement with Cytolytics is brilliant, because it's something that was really exciting for us. So to be able to get that excitement over to the shareholders and for them to share it is absolutely fantastic, because it is a really big thing for us. It is what we set out to do when we said, oh, we're going to refocus on preclinical. This is exactly what we set out to do. So it's really brilliant to actually have it.
Let's get to a question. Paul Newham asks, he'd like to know how long it's going to take CLX001 to become ready for phase 1 trial.
Well, so we would expect it to take somewhere between 2 and 3 years for that to happen, but it is very variable. And I will completely hold my hands up here and say, I'm going to say 2 to 3 years, but as soon as we start doing those first experiments, there is always scope for things to be either speeded up or slowed down on the basis of the results we get, because we want to make sure the right trial is run. We want to make sure the right data is going into that trial for the right patients to be getting into it. And at the moment, the first step of what we're doing is actually to do that stage of planning. So to start planning that first clinical trial, even though ValiRx isn't going to run it and ValiRx isn't going to sponsor it, we have to work out what that first trial will look like so that we can do the right preclinical experiments to support it. And at the moment, I don't even know if that would be a healthy volunteer trial or whether that would be going directly into patients, because we have to build the information around the safety and the tolerability preclinically in order to inform that decision and then backfill all of the data that we need.
And it's a very, very broad brush question at this point. And you've made it very clear that you've got a long way to go to get through the valley of death, and there's all sorts of different variables. But how much approximately might this approach take? What's the CapEx?
So we would typically, you would expect a preclinical program to cost anywhere from £500,000 to £2 million to complete. So we will be applying for grants, for example, from Innovate UK or from any other bodies that could appropriately support this sort of early stage innovation. And there will be a lot of variables. The type of nanoformulation, for example, that we go with could have quite a lot of bearing on how much toxicology we have to do. If we go into healthy volunteers, we might have to do some extra reproductive toxicology, for example, in order to make sure that we can bring relevant women into those early stage clinical trials. So a lot of it will depend on the end goal.
And Nicholas Slater asks, if someone were to offer you £50 million for a CLX001 as it stands, Would you accept, or have you got much bigger plans for it?
Well, is it just a one-off 15 million, or is that 15 million plus some royalties further down the line? So I think if they were to offer it, I would certainly negotiate with that person. If they could immediately see that level of value, that would be a door to open the negotiation. I wouldn't say I wouldn't be biting their hands off if there wasn't a royalty attached.
I like that. I like that answer, Susie. You snapped into businesswoman mode there.
I have to remember that I'm not just a scientist these days. I do have to keep an eye on the commercial angle as well.
Not quite right. It's not all about saving the world. You've got to save the world and make some money for shareholders. As I'm sure they're all listening to this, going, yes, absolutely. Right. Okay. Let's ask about Theorem RX and the licensing agreement. Now we've got questions from Andrew Selman, Alan Zeng, Nicholas Slater, James M. Who hasn't asked us questions about this? To be frank, they're all much of a muchness. They're all sort of. I think these two questions that we've pulled out pretty much encapsulate them all. What percentage chance would you give of the sub-licensing agreement being completed for 201, and why?
Well, I think everybody knows that I believe Theorem RX are the right partners to take VAR 201 forwards. They have the right level of expertise. They have the expertise in the science and the commercial angle to find further partners, and in the financial angle, actually, to understand the money that needs to be raised to take it forwards and to do that. Now, obviously it's disappointing that the timing hasn't worked in our favour on this. It would have been nice to have this wrapped up a year ago, to be quite frank. But they are still the right partners. They are still the right people to do it, and they are still moving forwards with it. So while they still have a credible plan in place to get that funding, I am completely backing them on it. So okay, I believe they will do it.
Which takes us to Alan Zeng's point. Have they done enough to justify exclusivity?
If they hadn't, we would have taken it away from them by now. If they weren't demonstrating credible progress to us, then we wouldn't just remove exclusivity, we would remove the letter of intent, because there's no point in having the letter of intent there and the intention to sublicense to them without the exclusivity, because they just wouldn't be able to do anything with that. So it is very much all or nothing. They have the letter of intent and they have the exclusivity until we believe that it's no longer relevant for them to be holding it.
And the sense that I'm getting from the questions that are coming in is that some of the shareholders would like to see a little bit more about what Theorem RX are actually doing, some of the work that they're doing. Is it possible to actually publish some of that, or give a little bit of clarity as to what they are doing? That's me channeling my inner shareholder there.
So very good job of channeling the spirit of the shareholders there. Now we do understand that everybody is frustrated with this. We understand that they would like to see everything that we see on it. But I think we've explained before that the work that we're doing with them is very much two-way. So the things that they're giving us scientific input, well, they're asking scientific questions about VAR 201 that then allow us to take things forward on VAR 301. So it is a two-way process how we're working. They're working with our patent agent already, but they are not doing any physical science in the lab yet. So I know I've had questions about this over email before, where people have said, well, have they done this, that, or the other experiment yet? No, they're not doing anything like that. They are spending time and thought and helping in an intellectual manner. But at the moment, they're a startup without funding. If they had funding, they would have signed the sub-license and paid us already. So there is no question about that whatsoever. We believe they will get that funding, and as soon as they do, we will have the sub-license with them. But okay, it's a belief. Until everything's signed, it's not signed.
Okay, Paul Newham again. He asks, can we expect an update in the coming weeks from the Hokkaido evaluation? You said that was due to end at the end of the year, December, did you?
Well, it's the middle of December that's scheduled to be on the 1 year point. So yes, we will provide an update before the 1 year point comes up.
Oh, does that mean you're not going to give us any hints and tips?
It's science. We're still waiting for data to come in. We're still working on it. We just have to see where we are at the 1 year point.
Okay. And work in progress.
Exactly.
Work in progress. They've got a great name, Hokkaido. Is that the university?
Oh yeah, so Hokkaido is an area of Japan that has a university. So they are a very strongly scientific university actually in Hokkaido. We've seen a number of projects from them.
Very good. Imran Khan asks, has your daily work changed since you added 2 additional staff? Do you get more free time to do scientific work, for example?
Oh, right. Scientific work. The scientific work I do at the moment, unfortunately, isn't in a lab because we don't have a lab. But yes, it's been absolutely brilliant having the 2 new staff members. Stella, of course, has come in place of Kevin Alexander, the board member. So that's not so much. Although Stella has a very different focus to Kevin, so it's really great working with somebody with that much energy as well as that much experience. But working with Kathy has enabled me to actually have more headspace to think science. So instead of having to store all of the science in my own head, I can talk to Kathy about it. And it's absolutely brilliant because she understands how I think science, which isn't always a given, and she knows how to push back on my understanding of science. And she gets all of the commercial angles as well. So it's having Kathy there as a right-hand person for the last few months has been absolutely brilliant. And it has given us a lot more scope. It's a synergy thing. It's not just there's another one of me to do more work. We can actually build something greater together.
Oh, that's a very good answer. Finally, Andrew Selman again. Can you tell us if any big pharma companies have shown an interest in the KC TNBC? I'm not sure I even understand what that is, but hey, you will.
Oh yes, no, he's referring to Cytolytics. So have we managed to...
Oh, Cytolytics. All right, I understand what that is.
Having it. Well, so we've had Kathy and Mark Chahan have been out at Europe last week, and that we did manage to announce the Cytolytics launch on the first day of the Europe partnering events. That was brilliant that they were immediately able to go out there and start talking about it. So yes, actually we have already presented it to quite a few biotech and pharma companies. So that has been really good to have a new project to talk to everyone about. We haven't sold it yet, but we do intend to do some work on it, so to build some value before we sell it on.
Brilliant, Susie. That was 30 minutes well spent, I have to say. You were fantastic. That was fantastic. I love the slides, and that was hugely engaging. That was terrific. I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation, Donald.
And we have AIM and OTC listed Poolbeg Pharma. It's a clinical stage infectious disease pharmaceutical company with a market cap of around £35 million. It operates a capital-light clinical model, which aims to develop products faster and more cost-effectively than the conventional biotech model. Poolbeg is targeting the growing infectious disease market, and Jeremy Skillington, CEO at Poolbeg Pharma, he's going to bring us up to date with what's been happening with the drug portfolio, including today's RSV AI announcement. Welcome, Jeremy.
Donald, good evening. Great to be here again.
So whereabouts are you live from tonight? Is it Dublin or is it London?
I'm live from Dublin, yes. I'm in London tomorrow, but I'm in Dublin this evening. So I head over to London. We've got a board meeting on Thursday. So
fantastic. And you guys have been busy.
We've been incredibly busy, and it's not slowing down either. There's a lot of activity, which I'll update everybody on tonight. But yeah, making some really good progress. So excited about that. I was kind of saying we're getting towards the end of the year, but there's a lot more to do yet. We're not thinking about.
Oh boy, you've got so much to do by the end of the year,
Absolutely,
Jeremy.
Yeah. There's a lot of time to fill, but yeah, looking forward into a good start to.
So it's exciting for the investors though, because there's some guaranteed news flow.
Oh, you've seen the number of RNS we put out. We've been very active because we've got a lot of streams. We've got a lot of things going on in parallel, and obviously each one of them, as we make progress, we announce to the market what's going on. So yeah, excited about that.
Okay, now I'll be quiet and I'll over to you, Jeremy.
I'll take it from here, Donald. I'll take it from here. Okay, sounds good. So yeah, just moving on, the usual disclaimer. What I plan to do tonight, again, I know there's some people who are familiar with the story, other people might be new, so I'll go through a high-level Poolbeg Pharma and our origins and our strategy. So we're building a leading infectious disease company, a one-stop shop for pharma. We too, just like the last caller, looking at out-licensing as part of our business strategy or business model to fund the company going forward. So we spun out of Open last year, renamed to hVivo right now. So they run human clinical trials, challenge studies for many, many years. We raised 25 million last year. As you said, Donald, we have a capital light model. We had 18.9 million by the middle of this year. So again, we spend very judiciously, moving our programs forward, but not spending excessively so. Cathal Friel, our chairman, is a significant shareholder along with Schroders, and that's all declared. Focused on infectious diseases, again, that's our origin. So we build on what we know. And this market, again, post-COVID-19 is expected to grow to 250 billion by 2025. So we plan to be part of that. And again, the strategy pharma are very keen to build out their pipelines, adding in infectious disease assets. We mimic ourselves on Evotec, based in Germany, who do early development, preclinical, some early clinical development, and then partner with pharma. So they've got many programs partnered with pharma who then generate revenue through upfront payments, milestones, royalties, etc., and a very significant market cap that we plan to chase over the coming years. The team is outstanding. A lot of years in the industry, myself, 20 years in biotech business development, but I'm a scientist by training as well, so understand the business and the science side of it. So again, building our pipelines, we're focused ourselves on European and US markets, a lot of value there, and then potentially out licensing to Asian partners, so making the pie bigger, as it were, when it comes to partnering activities. And again, we're looking to build our own internal pipeline as well. Just a quick slide on the business model. For those who don't know, we're focused on infectious diseases. So some of these it's a rapid path to human data, and that's what pharma loves when it comes to partnering. So these low-cost clinical trials in infectious diseases, which you can do, these are quite rapid trials. You get early human efficacy data in 12 to 18 months, and I'll talk about 001 shortly and where we are with that. And again, the plan is to out-license with biotech pharma partners to take it forward and fund development, pay us for the work we've done thus far through deals and negotiation, and then that funds our pipeline. So it's kind of a circular model that we keep building from there. Again, fortunately, being in infectious diseases, we are going to be very active in the non-dilutive funding stage. So again, that'll extend our runway, as it were, as well as generating revenue through deals. We'll generate some revenue through non-dilutive funding options. Significant funds here, 96% of over 7.5 billion given to biotech and farmers focused on infectious diseases in this year alone. So it's quite a large focus on infectious diseases for obvious reasons. We don't want the pandemic to happen again. Again, I'll name check a few good significant deals here. GSK acquiring Affinivax earlier this year for 2.1 billion upfront. So that's the kind of monies that pharma are willing to pay for programs that they like. Pfizer acquiring Reviral for up to 525 million. Again, that's in an RSV program that they had, an RSV vaccine. So again, RSV is of keen interest to pharma. So moving on, as I say, a lot to get through on these slides. I do want to talk about our pipeline. We began last year with Poolbeg 001 for a severe influenza treatment that is now in clinical testing. We in-licensed 2 programs, 002 from the University of Warwick, which this is a broadly applicable respiratory virus infection treatment and a prophylactic. And then Poolbeg 003 in-licensed from University College Dublin. This is a vaccine against a bacterial disease called melioidosis. I do hope to touch upon those, time permitting, but I do want to spend the majority of time tonight on 001 and our AI programs. As you said, Donald, we announced in RNS this morning significant progress, significant discoveries from our collaboration with 13 Biotech based out of New York, focusing on RSV therapeutics. So again, as I say, we're making really good progress. A lot of upcoming catalysts, as you say, a lot of news flow will be coming as we progress with these. We also have an AI collaboration with SiteReason based in Israel, very highly thought of company who have multiple deals with big pharmas, and also progressing our oral vaccine delivery platform, which again, in the interest of time, I won't be able to speak to tonight, but happy to discuss offline if needed. I think what's exciting for the company is some new recruits we brought in, Sultana Rajbali, who's driving forward our clinical trial programs, and most recently David English, who now is heading up VP of Business Development, who again, as you know, fits with the business model. We're going to be a deal-driven company, out licensing the programs that we move forward in the clinic. So it's great to have Sultana and David as part of the team right now. And just to kind of again explain, we have an in-licensing model where we bring programs into our pipeline. We'll obviously build what we have internally first. So David has been tasked with, and he was at BioEurope as well a few weeks ago, looking for new opportunities, engaging with potential partners, both on the in-licensing and out-licensing front. Again, driving forward some synergistic deals, some synergistic programs that we bring in, and then drive value by getting early human data and then partnering thereafter. And that's the out-licensing model. So again, we plan to be rapid here. We have a very streamlined team here. Decision-making is rapid, all very knowledgeable and experienced. So we move things forward quite quickly. And again, with David at Bayer Europe, kind of laying the groundwork to begin the discussions around POL001 partnering as the human data comes in, again, fitting with the business model. So we'll have data on that POL001 by the end of the year. So again, excited to have David on board to drive the business development side of the company forward. So talking about POL001, this is our lead asset, clinical stage, potential blockbuster immunomodulator for severe influenza. And again, as a reminder, I know we've all been distracted so much by COVID-19, but influenza is still there. There's grave numbers coming out of Australia whose seasonal flu season starts before our winter, obviously enough. But again, influenza is a disease that can lead to severe complications. The World Health Organization estimates 3 to 5 million severe influenza cases globally per annum. And that's the sweet spot that we are hitting, these people who get influenza, but then progress to a severe state where they're not recovering naturally and they need help, and there's nothing else there for them. And these, by the numbers, influenza alone, 1 billion per year, 5 to 10 million hospitalizations, and 500,000 deaths per year. So again, hopefully these will be preventable. But it's the knock-on effects as well, risk to kind of heart attacks, pneumonia, stroke. It's a pretty sinister virus that drives multiple pathologies with the patients if you're unfortunate enough to catch it. And of course, economic burdens as well. 11.2 billion in the US alone is the impact. So there's a big need for therapeutics for severe influenza. For our program in particular, clinical stage, as I said, it's already been through phase 1, the molecule that we've brought in-house. So it's safe and well tolerated. Importantly, it's agnostic to any viral strain, so it doesn't matter what virus appears every flu season, because we're tackling the immune system. And what happens, the immune system goes awry and we're able to dampen it down a little bit again. Again, a lot of governments are looking at stockpiling for future pandemics, and this is a great candidate for that. So what happens if you get infected with a flu virus? It triggers an inflammatory immune response through a pathway called P38 MAP kinase. We've got a blocker of that. We've got a small molecule inhibitor of that. So again, that's what drives a cytokine storm, so we can block that cytokine storm. And if you do happen to get a cytokine storm, that's what causes a lot of the tissue and lung damage. So the program itself, we've got patent protection out to 2038 as a method of treatment for severe influenza. And we're looking to expand our intellectual property to other areas as well to drive value for the company. So again, been very busy, very active in that space of late. The market itself, I'd say, is underserved, it's unmet, it's large and potentially growing. So 275 million for influenza alone, severe influenza alone in the US and Europe. But again, as I said, potentially beyond that for other diseases we're exploring. The clinical trial is ongoing in the Netherlands right now to a group called CHDR. They're making some really good progress there. We have down at the bottom, you can see 3 different doses that we've dosing, a low, a medium, a high, and we're progressing now into that high dose. So again, the study is progressing well. We hope to have kind of early readouts before the end of 2022. And as I say, we've got 36 volunteers as part of the study, and we're looking at the effect of P38 on an inflammatory response to LPS. And LPS is a bacterial fragment which drives the same pathways as influenza. So it's a nice, safe surrogate for a sort of influenza infection. So as I say, that's progressing well. We've got a whole host of endpoints that will reading out, through the analysis of, the blood and various samples coming from these individuals who are volunteer for the study. So again, as I say, progressing well, and excited to see the data ourselves on that. So we hope to have, as I say, kind of the kind of early indications by the end of this year. So again, excited about that early program. Transitioning now into our AI, artificial intelligence data analysis. I know we've announced 2 deals we've done this year, one with 13 Biotech focusing on RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, and then the second one with Cytoreason on influenza. But as you said, Donald, we announced this morning in RNS that our AI program used multiple novel RSV drug targets. And again, that was part of the goal for the study. And again, as I say, delighted with the progress that we're making with 13. We're meeting with their co-founder and chief technology officer in London on Thursday to trawl through this data even further. Again, for those in the know, I mean, it's interesting, you know, we're experienced with COVID-19, we're experienced with influenza, maybe RSV less so, but it is a significant issue. I know there's talk about this kind of triple-demic of COVID, flu, and RSV being an issue this winter. But as you see by the numbers on this slide, it primarily impacts older adults with, you know, their immune system is waning, and young children whose immune system has not been developed sufficiently. But the numbers are significant. Again, from a cost standpoint, from a patient standpoint, you know, 336,000 global hospitalizations for older adults, and 177,000 in the US alone. So it's very significant, and particularly in the young and children. Again, significant severe cause of these lower respiratory tract infections. 33 million children globally getting this disease, and again, 120,000 deaths. So it's a significant disease that needs a lot of help. So this is where we're excited that our approach can contribute to developing therapeutics for this. The AI program itself, as I say, we're using data generated from a human challenge model where healthy volunteers are deliberately infected with the RSV virus, and we track their signs and symptoms, take their various blood samples, look at their gene expression, their protein expression, and then that's where the AI comes in. So we can compare those who are not infected to those who are getting mild disease and see how their immune system is responding. So down the bottom, it's just explain unstructured data. And this is, you know, lots and lots of data that would take years for mere humans to interrogate and analyze. They build out through supercomputers and various algorithms, these disease models, what happens as a disease progresses, as people get sicker. This turns into signatures, what genes are up or down regulated at the same time, and then ultimately looking for these target identification. What can we drug to block the progression of the disease, to stop the immune system from overreacting, for example? And again, our work right now is focusing on target prioritization. As I say, the team from 1-3 have done terrific work over the last number of months. We signed a contract back in February. So this is what 8.5 months later, we're progressed to look at these newly identified drug targets. And again, it's rapid progression. Work that in previous times would have taken many years to do the same job. So very excited. And I will stress that this is unique. This data set is unique to Poolbeg. Nobody else, big pharma or anybody, has this data set. So they can't get the outputs from similar studies if they wanted to try their own ways. So again, very excited about this progress. As I say, we just got the data in the last few days. Very excited about it progressing. As I say, we'll meet with the 1-3 team in London on Thursday. Just one slide. I always love to drop in a data slide, but just give an example here of a gene X that they've identified. If you can just make out the green dots are that's in your kind of healthy volunteers who are not sick. The big lines there in gray are actually the gene. You can see as the disease progresses, this gene is upregulated even further as the immune system is stressed and advances. So again, a prime target that we can, next step now is to look for drugs to hit these targets. So again, very excited about that. And it's all correlated then with your viral burden. As your viral numbers increases, this genes increase as well. So it's kind of a very exciting process. And again, as I say, this is new and novel, and nobody else has this type of data. So again, very excited from a Poolbeg standpoint how unique this is for us. Our second AI collaboration is with Cytoreason, who are based in Israel, who interestingly already have collaborations with Pfizer, Roche, Merck, and Sanofi. So some of the really big guys, and we're their partner of choice for infectious diseases. So we're quite excited to that they're analyzing our influenza data. And then similarly on the last slide where I talked about the disease progression, where healthy volunteers in this case get infected with influenza, and then that progresses to the sickness, and they're able to identify the genes and proteins that are up or down regulated in response to the infection. So that analysis is ongoing at Cytoreason. They're optimizing or building the model right now on that, and that's progressing well. And then they have a longer time frame where we expect to get interesting targets, novel targets for influenza therapies coming out in Q2 of next year. So again, happy with the progress there. And again, it's a fantastic opportunity for a company like Poolbeg to have this data set analyzed by world-class AI companies. And as I said, the outputs will be unique, and we feel it's unique and will be of interest on their own, to pharma companies. So again, very excited to see where that takes us. Just a couple of minutes on our two other programs, or just a couple of slides. POLB 002, which we brought in from the University of Warwick, is a first-in-class broad-spectrum RNA-based intranasal immunotherapy. It's a single dose of intranasally. to trigger broader respiratory viral infections. So this is flu and beyond. So we can use this for RSV as well as COVID, as well as other respiratory infectious diseases. The work has been done over 20 years at the University of Warwick. They really have brought this forward incredibly well to a very robust late-stage preclinical package. As I say, it's a single dose. It both prevents infection as well as blocks infection after you're infected. So again, a nice, fascinating, novel dual mechanism of action. So again, it triggers nasal cells into an antiviral state. So again, that's how it protects from further infection. And again, we talk about respiratory viral infections. I've talked about flu, I've talked about RSV, but as a whole, 5 to 20% of the global population are infected by respiratory viral infections, with 3 million deaths. So again, there is pandemic potential here as a top 5 cause of global death. So again, it's there's always work to be done. And I think in a post-pandemic world, they're looking at other diseases and how we treat those. And again, one data slide, that's the scientist in me coming out. You can see how effective that this therapy is in blocking or protecting this species from influenza infection. Red line obviously is with treatment where there's no clinical deterioration. So excited about that program. And then lastly, POB 003. We're moving into the bacterial world right now. This is a gram-negative bacteria, Burkholderia pseudomallei. Many, I'm sure, would not have heard of it up to now, but it's rampant in the tropical and subtropical world. You can see there in red that there were 6 deaths from this infection recently. It's quite staggering. People are getting concerned about the endemic potential broadening out in a climate change world. This bacteria appears to be spreading as the world is warming up. Its habitat is expanding. You can catch this disease from inhalation, get it through wounds, get it through food. And as I say, there's a 54% fatality. So 165 cases annually. And even with antibiotic treatments, there's a 54% fatality. There's no vaccines out there for this. So we see this as a great opportunity to push it forward. Again, seeking non-dilutive funding to bring this forward. This is a key goal, a key aim of Poolbeg. And as I say, the US in particular are interested in this because they see this as a tier 1 biothreat agent. It's up there with anthrax, for example, that if a bad agent, a bad actor gets their hands on this, they can spread it and cause havoc very quickly. So my last slide is just a summary of who we are and where we are. As I say, we've made a lot of progress this year. We will continue to do so. Some near-term value inflection points focused on the readouts. We'll have initial readouts from the LPS challenge study by the end of this year. The AI program, as I say, we have the targets now. We're going to look.
The second question, please.
We're going to look for drugs that beyond this right now. So that's the next step here. The team, as I say, is we've built a team, we've expanded a team, so we're executing on our strategy. As I say, we're hiring, and we hired a new head of business development and a new global clinical director as we head in those directions. We don't plan to fundraise. We're always stressing that. We have a cash balance in the middle of the year, 18.9 million, and the capital light model allows us to generate data rapidly and then partner quite quickly while not spending too much funds to do that. And again, focused on infectious diseases, as we know that's a big and growing market, and pharma need products, and we'll be there to provide them with them. So again, a great opportunity to drive shareholder value well into the future. Thank you, Donald, for the time again.
Okay, Jeremy, thank you very much indeed. You squeezed an awful lot in your 20 minutes there. You did very well.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on, and you paraphrased it beautifully. Thank you very much. So what happens next with the RSV AI study that you announced this morning? As you said, it's taken 8.5 months to get to this point. What's next?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. As I say, part of the strategy now is like we've identified targets, and these are kind of targets, potential drug targets that we know are impacted by RSV infection. And now we want to identify drugs that then can target those targets and block those targets. And as you know, the business model is looking for drugs that have pre-existing clinical data, ideally. So that's where they're already known to be safe and well tolerated. They might have been put into the clinic for another disease, but nobody, heretofore understood that they could have a potential benefit in RSV. And that's where our, knowledge and expertise can play a role. So we'll be seeking for these drugs. So by the end of the year, as I say, it's rapid progress without question. But by the end of the year, we hope to identify some of these drugs and then get access to them. We got to do some testing in RSV models to, demonstrate that proof of concept, proof of mechanism, and then move it forward rapidly into clinical testing. And again, ultimately partnering with pharma. As I say, our RSV, there's still a large unmet medical need for this respiratory viral infection. And this is a new and novel approach to identify targets and drugs.
You're working with 1.3, you're working with Cytoreason, you declare these to be world-class. Do you see this as the way forward, not just for yourselves, but for other people in your spot, in your area?
It's a good question. I think, from an AI standpoint, it's like you have this kind of this intersection where, computer power has advanced, programming power has advanced, data sets, are now accessible. And, up to now, there was more of a manual curation approach. Absolutely. I think there's a way to analyze data rapidly, large data sets rapidly, and coming up and understanding better what's going on in the disease situation. I think infectious diseases is quite unique, particularly with the challenge model that we have, where you have a person comes in, they're healthy, then they get sick and then they recover. And you can track all the way along what's going on. Maybe a bit more challenging in an oncology setting where they're seeing patients when they're already sick. But I think definitely there's going to be a lot of emphasis on AI in the future, whether it's
I'm going to cheer you up, Jeremy. I'm going to cheer you up immensely. It entirely depends on the quality of the data that you put in terms of the outcomes.
Yes.
And you guys have got fantastic data sets. So
pristine is the word we use. It's pristine.
There you go.
It's really good data sets. As I say, it's clean, and having people that are healthy become sick and recover. Nobody else has that type of data. So perfect for infectious diseases as well. So very excited about that.
Okay, let me turn to 001. In simple terms, if 001 comes good, is it a financial game changer, do you think? I mean, I know I'm loading an awful lot on you, but if it were to come good...
like deal terms, as I say, we've got very strong intellectual property around the use of P38 inhibitors in severe influenza. So there's a market there for that, we know. So if the data comes through, you're right. The deal terms are David English, fantastic to have him on board. The dialogues, he had a very busy Bio Europe. We're at Jefferies in London next week with 30-odd meetings with various groups. So, yes, 2023 is transaction year. So again, having the data set in hand and then beginning the deal work. And as we say, the business model is the upfronts, milestones, royalties. That's funneled or funded back into the company to build our pipeline even further, to have more deals, have more assets to partner. So that'll be the key catalyst, I think. And I think proof of, demonstrating the business model works. I think that's key. So as I say, we've worked really hard this year to push the program forward. And again, we're excited to see the data come out as well. So
okay. And a question in from Robin Davidson here. Can you disclose how many novel RSV targets have been identified with 1.3? How many of these RSV targets have known drugs, as mentioned in the RNS? And what are your selection criteria for taking these forwards? I know you're going to say you're actually physically meeting with these folks on Thursday, but beyond that.
But beyond that, we've just received, as you know, a public company, as soon as we get the data in, we have to, or you have to announce, or we've had a look at it. We're excited to see, what's in there. I think there's some things that kind of surprised us, pleasantly surprised us. That's just the target phase. Then the drug phase comes next, and that's where 1.3 are moving into that next phase of analysis right now. So that, and we hope that that'll be rapid as well. So 8 months, maybe in the next few weeks, the next 4 weeks, we should have, some understanding of that. Certainly by the end of the year, all going well. So again, pleasantly surprised with what we've seen thus far, but obviously we need to dig in a little bit deeper, having just received the data recently before announcing.
Okay, melodoliosis, which I can't actually pronounce, but I give it my best shot. I give it my best shot there. What are the next steps with that one?
Yeah, so this is, again, it's a program with a late preclinical package, a lot of good preclinical data. There's clean toxicology studies. So the next natural step then is kind of manufacturing, getting it into humans as quickly as possible. We would like this to be, externally funded through grant funding. So we've got a number of inroads, let's say, into the US, as I mentioned, are keen on that. The various US government bodies like NIH, for example. So again, very exciting. There's nothing else out there for this disease that, as I say, there's a significant unmet need for this with no vaccines on the market whatsoever.
Okay, Sparky J asks, have you received, he's talking about PLB001, have you received any preliminary feedback from the lab concerning 001? And are you positive it is working as you believe it would? He's a cynic.
It's not a cynic, it's a direct question, but obviously we can't comment that. It's a blinded study. So as I say, we've got volunteers that come in. Some 9 of the 12 received drug, 3 of them received placebo. So we don't know who's received what. And as I say, that's over 3 different doses. We just started the last dose right now, so we don't have any insights into that yet, and neither should we, because again, it tends to kind of spoil the clinical trial. So it's a blinded study. So we're I don't want to, in the dark. I don't like to use that. Obviously, we're happy with progress right now, but we don't have great insight into data yet. Just yet. That all will be
quite
read.
No, that makes a lot of sense. He also asks a second question: any progression on the reverse takeover into NASDAQ, and would you be searching for the company with product and out of cash, or a similar one as Poolbeg with he describes a good wedge of cash as well as promising products?
Yeah, we have work ongoing in the background. That's another thing that's keeping us busy. As Cathal likes to say, our chairman, there's a lot of fallen angels. People who's have more cash than their value. They might have stumbled in the clinic and they're looking for alternatives. And we think Poolbeg is a great opportunity. The news flow that we'll have over the next number of years, the products we'll be bringing forward the next number of years. We'd love to get into the US market. As you know, we have an OTC listing that was dipping our toes, but we'd like to get onto full NASDAQ. So we've got discussions ongoing in the background. We're exploring a number of opportunities. Like synergy with an infectious disease company is kind of an obvious overlap. But we'll cast the net broader than that. But we're looking hard at opportunities in that space. What difference would a full NASDAQ listing make for you? It's a really good question. I think it's access, obviously, to a larger market. It's access to a broader investor base. I mean, liquidity without question, will be a lot better on NASDAQ. And we hope that the share, both sets of share prices goes up, from the London name as well as US NASDAQ. But again, it's as I say, it's a bigger market essentially. But getting into that market would be terrific. And as I say, we can there's a growing obviously population in the US as well who are in need of our products. So it's getting the Poolbeg name out there as well will help. Okay, let me quickly ask you a personal question, Jeremy. I do apologize for this. Presumably you were happy to be able to actually buy some Poolbeg shares. Finally, yes. I mean, it's a question that I had every time, and and people will recognize we have RNSs coming out almost bi-weekly at this stage. But the nomads and the brokers were ultra cautious, and I fully understand that with what's coming down the pike with regards to news flow. So they were very resistant to me purchasing well before I did. But finally, the window opened and it says, "Sure, off you go." So yeah, so happy to be formally on board as a shareholder. And as I say, it's I appreciate people like the skin in the game approach, and that's perfectly fine. I fully understand that. So it's good to have skin in the game while we work so hard to push the programs. I hear this from so many CEOs that they actually find it extremely difficult to find a gap in the regulatory gap where they're not actually privy to insider information in order to actually buy the shares. I mean, it's blame the brokers, not the CEO. Oh, exactly. It's the nomads. Yes, but I appreciate where they're coming from. Great. Okay, final question, news flow. What can we expect in the next few months from Poolbeg? Yeah, I mean, we talked about 001 as the wrapping up of that trial, as I say, before the end of the year. Hopefully we'll get a kind of an early data read and understanding. As I say, it'll still be blinded, but it'll give us an understanding. Continuing progress with the AI. As I say, we talked about having targets for OSV, looking for drugs, right? Will be the next phase. So that'll be it as well. And of course, the side of reason, but as I said, there's a lot going on. There'll be a lot of news flow, we're, as you can appreciate, we're quite prompt, and we're kind of very respectful of the market, keeping them updated as best we can. So we'll keep going. We'll keep working hard. We're very excited about this space. I think we've kind of found a nice niche. We found a very unique, very nice business model, and you want to execute as best as we can. Jeremy Skillington, CEO at Poolbeg Pharma, thank you so much for joining us. That was absolutely terrific. That was a half an hour well spent in your company. enCore Energy is the most diversified in situ recovery uranium development company in the United States currently, and is listed on the TSXV, which is Canada, and OTC, which is America, with a market cap of around $371 million. enCore is focused on becoming the next domestic producer of uranium in the United States,
has a substantial pipeline of quality development stage assets, both short, medium, and long-term opportunities in the US. And right now it's focused on producing uranium from its licensed and past-producing South Texas Rosita processing plant by 2023. William M. Sheriff, Executive Chair at enCore Energy, joins us live. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hello, William. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Hopefully your audience and yourself can see the presentation at this point.
Yes, I'm sure they can. I worry not about that.
Very good.
Yes. So are you in Colorado or are you in Texas today?
I'm in Colorado. I actually live in Colorado, and the corporate offices are in Texas, as are the first centers of operation, but we have offices across the U.S., including Wyoming and South Dakota.
Okay, well, you're an incredibly busy man. I understand that very clearly. I've run my eye across the company, and oh my goodness, what are you not doing at the moment? You're so busy. So I'm going to be quiet, and I'm going to let you take your presentation away. Over to you.
Very good. Hopefully this will explain some of the necessity of our being so terribly busy. You know, it all starts out, I guess, as a backdrop, is the U.S. is the world's largest consumer of uranium to power its fleet of nuclear reactors, the biggest nuclear energy generator on Earth. Right now, the U.S. is consuming roughly 47 million pounds a year and producing essentially zero. And we're heavily reliant upon exports coming through the port of St. Petersburg, Russia, which in essence means that 60% of our needed uranium can be stopped at Mr. Putin's whim. And that's a critical situation that has recently, shall we say, reignited concerns over domestic supply. The U.S. has plenty of uranium. It's just been undercut by pricing from Kazakhstan and Russia, and the time for U.S. To return to some form of dominance is well past. So we're 100% focused on in situ recovery of uranium in the United States. And the in situ process I'll go over briefly, but it essentially is a municipal water treatment plant that injects oxygen into groundwater through injection wells. That dissolves the uranium, much as salt will dissolve in water. And we pump the uranium in a liquid form, very dilute, in the groundwater through a plant, very much like a municipal water treatment plant, recovering the uranium on resins, stripping it, re-injecting oxygen fortified water. So it's an extremely green process, and one that will produce uranium on a very economically favorable basis. Let's see if I can get to the disclaimer. This, of course, is the, we'll be making forward-looking statements. And this is a graph of your uranium price over the past 15 years or so, showing the last little boom that was about 3 years in process, about 2005 to 2008. And this boom that was coincidental with the general peaking of the commodity cycle prior to the economic difficulties in 2008 was precipitated by a supply interruption at 3 of the largest mines. It was not demand driven, and so it had a very short duration, although very exciting, having peaked at $135. During this time frame is when I first became active in the business, being co-founder and chairman of Energy Metals Corp. Started in 2004 with a little under 2 million market cap. In 30 months, we'd acquired the largest uranium resource base in the history of the country and sold the Uranium One for $1.8 billion in 2008. Served on their board for a couple of years before starting enCore in 2010. Fukushima came along, which put us on delay for the better part of a decade. And 2 years ago, we saw the renaissance coming. And along with Paul Goranson joining our team as our CEO, who had built the last 3 or 4 in situ plants in the US and had actually built a plant under budget and under time back during that 2005 to 6 timeframe, and enjoyed selling into that giant price spike. Along with his talent, really we have a well-rounded, very deep bench in the in situ, both technically and operationally, and I'll get into that a bit further. But combining those 2 teams has really put us at the forefront of the in situ field. Here again, our emphasis is on South Texas. South Texas, we have 2 of only 11 licensed in situ recovery plants in the United States. And there are 4 in the state. We have 2 of those. We've spent the last 12 months renovating and completely modernizing electronically the Rosita plant. It has now been finished. It's going through wet commissioning as we speak, and we'll be ready to support production in 2023 at Rosita. We have, in addition to Rosita, we have a whole series of production pipeline projects in the US, and I'll get to those in detail later, but overall the company has 90 million pounds of uranium in the measured and indicated category, with another 9 million pounds in the inferred category. This does not include an additional almost 70 million in the historic category, which was largely done by large oil companies in the 70s. We found their data to be quite reliable, and there's an extremely high correlation of conversion into 43101 resources. We will be undertaking that systematically as we move forward, but again, our emphasis is on near-term production. All of it will be through in the in situ means, which, as I mentioned, is not invasive. You don't have open pits, you don't have underground operations, you don't have many of the things you associate with a mine, including tailings ponds, tailings piles, no dust, no possible breaches of dams, etc. So it's a very quick, very inexpensive way to get into the uranium project, and it also was quite efficient at cleaning up once you're done, so reclamation. We do have, as I mentioned, a very deep bench in it. Our uranium sales strategy is one of a mixed bag. We prefer to have a long-term goal of 50% of our uranium production will be characterized by spot sales, and 50% will be long-term contracts. These long-term contracts will be driven by a series of different nuclear utilities. They'll have floors and ceilings, and they will account for roughly half our sales. So it's a nice blended approach to make sure that we are a long-term player and very profitable in the business, yet exposing ourselves with a significant amount of production to what we believe to be a rather explosive market coming in the spot. Also have a number of other assets that we use to build our balance sheet, non-core asset disposition, of which we've made several over the course of the last year, and you can find those on our website under news releases, as well as an investment in a sister enterprise that's taking our in situ technology and trying to apply it to other minerals, which would, in fact, should it be successful, revolutionize the entire mining industry. A little bit of information on the company. We have a market cap just shy of 400 million Canadian. We have 107 million shares out with cash on hand of $11.5 million US dollars, as well as $5 million in current assets that are easily convertible into cash. As you may see, and with uranium being so cyclical, and we've having missed several different cycles in the industry, we've got quite a bit of gray hair on our board, and I'll get through some of the key members of our board now. Myself, as we mentioned, our Chief Executive Officer, Paul Goranson. He's built 3 or 4 of the last ISR plants in the country. Some notable positions: he was President of Cameco Resources, Chief Operating Officer of Energy Fuels, etc., and also spent quite a bit of time with Rio Algam. So his distinguished 35-year career has seen him quite active at the forefront of the in situ development. Dr. Dennis Stover, our current Chief Technical Officer and former Chief Executive Officer, he is one of the 2 co-inventors of the in situ process, and as such is still a holder of 6 patents, and his expertise is invaluable to us as we continue to make progress not only with the in situ operations, but improving them and increasing their efficiency. Richard Cherry, 40 years in the industry with General Atomics, having spent a lot of time in contracted with nuclear fuels. Mark Police, a permitting expert, again, 40 years ISR. Bill Harris, our outside expert, when we went to the NYSE the first time, he fulfilled the role of our Sarbanes-Oxley requirement for independent financial expert. And our newest director, I want to highlight Susan Hoxie-Key. She brings to us the unique perspective of our ultimate customer. She was most recently a nuclear physicist with the Southern Company, who is currently loading the first new reactor in the US, Vogtle 3. First new one in 20 years. Vogtle 4 is quickly on the heels of 3. It'll become operational next year. Her job at Southern Company has been not only involved with fuel procurement, but also in terms of designing the actual fuel rod assemblies and bundles that go into the reactor. So her expertise on the board really helps us understand our customer. I'm not going to read all these to you, but I'll highlight Greg Zerzon, our General Counsel and Chief Administrative Officer. He's had about 30 years in Washington serving for the Trump administration in the Department of Interior, where he had 400 counselors under him. Most of the uranium activities in the United States, if they are not in Texas, are on public land, and his familiarity with the Department of Interior and the way the inner workings thereof serve us quite well. Advisory board, here again, I'd refer you to our website and our PowerPoint. Just in light of time, we won't go through all of those, but we certainly have expertise in every aspect of the fuel cycle, from discovery, exploration, all the way through production and ultimately reclamation. So this perfect storm that we're seeing now in the uranium sector, bipartisan support. This is the first time we've seen bipartisan support for the nuclear sector in the U.S. since pre-3 Mile Island, so going back to the 70s, first time in 45 years. I've already illustrated the clear demand and necessity, really, for a domestic supply of uranium that's not at the mercy of potentially adversary nations. The Department of Energy has started the early stages of building back a strategic uranium reserve with tenders out currently for the initial contract amounts for domestically produced material. There's been a number of acts through Congress that have enhanced the entire nuclear fuel cycle, with a lot of emphasis on the conversion and enrichment aspects of it. Everything that's advanced on the nuclear side ultimately comes down to the need for more and more yellow cake, which is our product. We're the only really dependable 24/7 carbon-free power source that's out there that can handle baseload power. Wind and solar are fine and they have their place, but as we all know, the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun certainly doesn't shine all the time. So clearly, if we're going to have a carbon-free green world, nuclear is a key part of it. Speaking of the nuclear fuel cycle, this will give you a bit of an idea of the time that's involved in many of the processes. We produce yellow cake, that is uranium U3O8, and that is shipped in drums by truck, by special carriers to the conversion plant in Metropolis, Illinois. There it is converted into UF6, which is a gas, goes to the enrichment plant where that gas is spun down into centrifuges, enriching the Mother Nature's 0.7% U235 up to about 5% U235. That then goes into fabrication of fuel rods and bundles that go into the nuclear plant. The purpose of the slide not only to illustrate the many steps of the fuel cycle, but the timing of it. It takes roughly 2 to 2.5 years from when we produce the yellow cake until it actually gets into the nuclear power plant. This creates a long-term scheduling issue for the utilities. It also represents a market that doesn't respond instantly to such things as blockades of supply coming in from Russia or other potential sources. Our particular pipeline of projects that I'd mentioned, this is a map of the Western US showing the primary uranium production basins. Our operations are centered in Texas for the immediate future, as we will have production coming on in 2023 from the Rosita plant. And that will be augmented by Upper Sand Creek, a second project there that comes in 24. Permits have already been issued to incorporate the Upper Sand Creek into the Rosita operations as a satellite. Work has been continuing on the South Dakota Dewey Burdock project. This one is scheduled for 2025. And in fact, I've just returned from South Dakota, where I've spent several weeks over the last couple of months on community relations and moving things forward on that. Our Gas Hills, Wyoming project is right on the heels of South Dakota, coming in 26. And then that follows up in 27 and the out years by New Mexico, where we have a huge storehouse of value. New Mexico does face more permitting challenges, as well as developing a positive relationship with the Navajo Nation to move that forward. South Texas production highlights, I think I've already hit on this, other than we have 1.6 million pounds a year of capacity. We do have satellite infrastructure so that remote fields can be exploited and then processed at our central plants. And again, two of the very few licensed plants. This is a map of the Rosita area. Our first production next year will come from the yellow outline on the north side of the highway there, known as the Rosita extension. Rosita South will continue to contribute in the out years, and that's some of the yellow blob you see on the south side of the highway. We've also identified a number of other layers beneath the main productive layer here, which is quite shallow, a couple hundred feet. So there are other layers below that contain uranium, and we'll be working to move those along as we go. Just some shots of the renovation of the plant, the bags of resin. I want to highlight some of the Dewey Burdock economics, as this will be the second project coming in. 17 million pounds, located right on the Wyoming border. Incredibly robust economic projections, IRR 55%, low capex of 31 million, and that's based on a $35 uranium price. Similarly, the Gas Hills, which will be the third project coming on in Wyoming, we're looking at a very, very good 7-year mine life with IRR exceeding 40% after tax, and that here again is based on very low prices of uranium at $35. So both these projects would fall in the lowest 10% of cost and in the upper 15 or 20% of profitability projects on the horizon. And then you can see our dominant long-term holding in New Mexico, where we hold over 50% of the resources there, and the deposits are quite large. Crown Point being the lead project, just as an example, 32 million pounds at over 0.1. And I should mention all of our ISR resources in South Dakota, Wyoming, and New Mexico are in excess of 0.10% U3O8, which is a very good grade when compared to most of the recent producers and most of our peers that have most of their resources in the 0.07 to 0.08 range, some as low as 0.04. So higher grade, long-lived ISR projects are the core of the company, along with an incredibly gifted staff, and being able to capitalize on our other assets, being non-core assets, and as I mentioned, our investment into the ISR applications for other metals such as gold, which, if successful, would revolutionize the entire mining industry. In summary, we have a very clear-cut, a well-structured company with a path to production starting in 2023 at Rosita, followed up by additional Texas production from the Upper Sand Creek with the 2 plants we have there. We have phased expansion, allowing for increased production at Rosita, and then moving into other states with the South Dakota Dewey Burdock project, and then moving on into Gas Hills, Wyoming, ultimately in New Mexico. We look to build the company's production to 5 million pounds a year prior to entering New Mexico. After New Mexico, that'll go up by a couple million pounds a year. We see this being a multi-decade cycle in the nuclear energy business, and we intend to be at the forefront of that on the green side with the ISR production in the world's largest consumer of our product, the United States. And with that, I would open it up to any questions.
Okay, William, thank you so much for that. That was terrific. You really squeezed a lot in there.
Well, we're quite active, as you pointed out, and we've got a very excited, dynamic team working on a number of fronts.
Okay, uranium is not something that we're incredibly used to here. We're with miners, gold, oil and gas, pharma, but uranium, we don't do so much uranium in the UK, so it's absolutely fantastic to have you on tonight. And in situ leaching, why have you chosen to specialize in situ leaching, and what are the advantages and disadvantages versus the open pit, underground, and you know, however else you might get your hands on uranium?
Sure. And the UK should have a keen interest in uranium as you're building Hinkley, which is one of the largest plants in the world. And it's moving forward, and quite an impressive construction site, I'd point out as well. But
very good. And we've got Sizewell C as well, but not all these things are terribly popular in the UK. But, you know, I'm a fan, but not everybody is.
Understand it. It's been a controversy, and rightfully so, with the spectacular coverage of a few of the events over the last 30 or 40 years. But you know, I'd point out that coal, which everyone's quite familiar with, has a fatality rate of 4 orders of magnitude greater than nuclear energy per unit of energy. So it's nuclear is the safest we have. It has the same health hazards of solar and wind, which are at the lowest end of the spectrum. So once people dig through that initial media hype and sensationalism, they find out that indeed it's a very, very safe power source and key to the future of the planet. But getting back to your original question on ISR and why ISR, very simply, we are concerned with the planet. We do want to produce green energy. We don't want to be involved with giant open pits that scar the landscape. We don't want to be involved with tailings dams that have the potential to breach and break. We don't want to be involved with tailings, which stored on top of the ground can be remobilized by wind and turned into dust. Not to mention the multi-decade proposition of doing reclamation on a conventional mine, especially one that has radiological implications. You can be there 50 or 60 years cleaning it up. And as many of them have been and still are around the world. So with in situ, we have a short development period of time. We do all of our, we don't really mine. Calling it a mine is a misnomer. We're actually a water treatment company. We drill wells, we inject oxygen. That's the only lixiviant or only product that we inject along with the water into the ground. Basically, the uranium is stopped in the sandstone due to a redox reaction, going from a reduced state, going from an oxidized state where it's dissolved in water to a reduced state where it's fixed on the outside grains of sandstone. So by injecting oxygen, we're simply reversing Mother Nature's process and reabsorbing the uranium or taking it back into solution. And we pump that to the surface, typically in very small concentrations, but lots of gallons of water, something on the order of 30 or 40 parts per million. And there we run it through a municipal water treatment facility, series of long tubes where we perform ion exchange with beaded resin. Same thing they do in your municipal water supply system all over the world. It just happens to be that the disposal product is our economic product. And so we take the uranium and process it further and then sell it. So it's just far superior in terms of economics and in terms of its footprint on the ground and in terms of being able to fix it and return it to the original state once we're done. No comparison. And so that's why we've built the best team for ISR and why we're moving forward on that basis exclusively.
William, that was a great answer. Thank you very much indeed. The Rosita processing plant is just a mile away from the Rosita PAA. They're actually really quite close to each other. It was a uranium mine. It's currently being refurbished to become one again. So what's been done and what's still to be done?
Well, the plant was the biggest chunk of the work, and it's been fully retrofitted with modern alarms and electronic wizardry. I'm a geologist, so it's a little beyond me in terms of the exact technical breakdown, but all the technological advances have been now put into the mills or into the processing plant since it last operated in 2009. And it had been renovated then in 2005 up to standards then, but of course the standards keep advancing. So, we're state of the art on that processing plant now. In terms of the well field, drilling has been going on for over a year now. We've put in our monitor wells, which go around the ore body as well as above it and below it to ensure that our oxygenated water that we're injecting doesn't leave the area that we're pumping from. We always pump about 0.5% more water than we inject to make sure that we control the direction of the water flow. It'll flow towards low pressure, and by overproducing 0.5%, it goes exactly where we want it to go. Nonetheless, the monitor wells are there for a sense of security. And we're about have all the monitor wells in. Everything's cased from the ground, from the bottom all the way to the top to ensure, here again, integrity of the system. And we're about 60% of the way through installing the actual well fields in the production PAA. So we would look forward to having that completed, I would say probably early second quarter next year, or early to mid second quarter, and then production would be ensuing shortly thereafter.
And could you give us some sense of CapEx? I was thinking it was a very CapEx light project because it's refurbishment, but you've now told me it's state of the art, and I'm thinking, okay.
Well, it is. A lot of this is because we were fortunate enough to inherit a 26-man work crew on site that had actually operated the plant during the previous cycle. So, we have them on the payroll and don't count them as CapEx, but their labor was a big part of being able to do many of the renovations ourselves, And so our CapEx on the entire plant renovation was right at $1 million US. And it came in on time with a couple of supply chain interruptions, but it's all done now. And the actual well field itself is about something on the order of $4 to $5 million for installation. So You're right, the CapEx is very low, but then again, we benefited from the bulk of the expense on the plant having already been spent by our predecessors. And so that typically $25 million expense was something we weren't having to bear. We were the clear beneficiaries of that. And so the next
good business, William.
Well, timing, right? You know, we started this. We started this 12 years ago, and we're silent for the first 10. And then we saw a sea change coming in uranium, both politically and in terms of supply and demand. And we're quick to move on some producing assets, or production assets rather, not producing, but production assets that we can quickly bring into production. And we're also benefiting from very shallow depths. Our pumping depths at Rosita on the first well field will be under 200 feet, and the second one about 250 feet. So our lifting cost, if you will, for the water is very, very low.
So you've done very well, I have to say. I'm going to ask you about nuclear fuels, but I have to say, not only have you been doing Rosita, you've been doing Dewey Burdock and Upper Sand Creek. My goodness, you know, you guys are phenomenally busy, but not too busy to have done a deal. So not only are you going forwards, but you're doing something with you know, another asset that you own.
Well, and the rationale behind nuclear fuels is really quite simple, although explanation certainly required. enCore is not an exploration company. We're a production company. We have a whole pipeline of projects ready to sequentially go into production and beef up our production profile up to that targeted 5 million and beyond pounds per annum. And along the way, we are also beneficiaries of the largest proprietary database on uranium in the United States, one that I've been assembling since 1986. And in the US, unlike many jurisdictions, the data that is generated on properties geologically stays private. It's not available to the public. So it's quite valuable. And in the course of reviewing that, from time to time, we find major jewels that are exploration projects, not quite ready for production, but quite promising. And when we do, we need to find a home for them, because here again, we aren't exploration. Our shareholders invest in us for production and for the profits and benefits from production. So rather than just auctioning it off to just anyone, we actually look for companies with very good management, very good technical ability, that can actually take those exploration assets and bring them up to the standards at which they would fit into a production pipeline. That is, take the risk and prove up the good, promising geology into a solid production play. And we've done just that at Nuclear Fuels with the KC project, which is an enormous exploration project in Wyoming. I personally believe it to be the best one in the US currently. Clearly an ISR target, multiple stratigraphic units, extends over 26 miles. We've got the entire district under control. It's going to cost, you know, ultimately $20 million to drill it out, maybe a bit more. And our shareholders don't want the distraction where that money could be going into renovating plants, drilling well fields, getting into production. But what we have done is we've retained the right to back into this. So we've placed it with a company with good technical expertise. We've put 2 members of our team on their board. I'm one of the nominees, along with another gentleman, and to ensure that it moves in the right direction. And should it turn into a sizable 15 million pound or larger deposit, we have the right to buy back in a 51% interest for a multiple of what the Nuclear Fuels has spent on the project. And that would pop it right into our production profile. So we've retained an interest in it. We keep our eyes on it, but someone else is actually developing it to the resource state. And then we'll take another hard look at it to possibly put it back into our production pipeline once it's ready.
William, a final question for you. I'm so sorry we're out of time, but I've got a fantastic question for you. We've had Consolidated Uranium on, we've had Labrador Uranium on, and they both told us that they see a global uranium super cycle coming, perhaps in 2024. So is that what you see? And is that why you're, 2 years ago, you started to develop all these different projects?
I think I would agree with that. I might frame it a bit differently. I think here again, I prefer the baseball analogy. I know it's not a popular sport there, perhaps, but
we can
the game hasn't started. We're in warm-ups. You're starting to see the prices move. There's a high likelihood there are going to be some interruptions in the flow through St. Petersburg at some point, unfortunately. Quite frankly, the revenue on uranium to Mr. Putin is insignificant compared to his oil and gas revenue. So if he wanted to be a bit of a pain, he could flip the switch and cause us some severe problems in the US and the Western world on the uranium front. And so far, he's been quite prone to do these things. So we aren't dependent upon that because here again, the current supply demand is in the favor of the producer anyway. That would simply be an exacerbating event. But I think you're going to see a decade of improving economics and improving use for nuclear industry, much like the decade leading up into the late 60s and 70s, where we were planning to have 4 times the number of reactors on Earth that we do now. Now those plans were interrupted, or as I say, put on hold or interrupted, or about the same. But I think you're going to see a similar build-out plan. I mean, you hardly go a week now without some nation announcing a new plan to build a nuclear reactor. You're seeing countries that have deemed to shut down reactors, extending the lives of those. You're seeing in the US, you're seeing a lot of reactors that had a certain power output rating being granted a higher output rating. Well, obviously, if you get more power out, you have to put more fuel in. So everything right now is lined up in favor of uranium. I'm sure there'll be a few little minor bumps along the road, but I think we're in for a super cycle is a good term for it, but I think I prefer to call it we're in for a very good, healthy industry for a multi-decade period for the first time, really, since the advent of nuclear power. And
investors take note. Investors take note. A healthy cycle for 10 years to come. We've just been speaking to William Sheriff. He's the executive chairman at enCore Energy. He's been speaking to me from Colorado, live from Colorado. Thank you so much, William. That was fantastic. And now for Goldplat. The South Africa-based gold producer has international gold recovery operations in South Africa and Ghana, and has just announced an operational update for Q1. The core business has been profitable over the last 11 quarters, and Goldplat has steadily been investing for growth. The shares were trading at an all-time high yesterday, with a market cap around £20 million, and GDP is focused on developing a gold tailings revenue stream in South Africa, as well as growing the business organically in Ghana. And tonight, CEO Werner Klingenberg is speaking to us from Johannesburg, and he's going to explain why he thinks Goldplat should be seen as a mining services group rather than a gold recovery business. Over to you, Werner.
Thank you, Donald. And it's nice to join you tonight. If I'm correct, I understand there's a few new individuals in the audience, and I'm looking forward to share a bit of the Goldplat story with you. As you can see on the slide, Goldplat, we focus on recovering value from previously mined resources, and it's a bit more complex, I guess, than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us through a bit of simple detail in terms of what Goldplat does, trying to keep it short because I'm sure there's a lot of questions at the end, and I would rather prefer to address those. So if we look at Goldplat PLC, we've been listed on the London Stock Exchange since 2006. We're a cash generative business, as I've indicated, focused on recovering value from previously mined material, specifically in South Africa and West Africa, but we also source wider into Africa as well as South America. And the focus is really on gold and PGMs. We've started the business focusing on recovering gold on behalf of the mining industry, current mining industry as well as historical. And I'll give you a bit more detail in terms of the type of material we process on behalf of the mining industry. We are quite a niche recovery business. We've obviously built up quite an experienced management team over the last 20 years, specifically focusing on providing solutions to the gold mining industry that generates different types of products. If we then step back, before I talk about our assets that we've got on book, that we plan to process in the future, I just want to move on to a little bit more of detail. So Goldplat Recovery basically have services, as I said, blue chip gold producers in South Africa, as well as in West Africa. We've got specific plant that has the ability to recover gold from the different types of material being generated by the mining industry. That includes fine carbons, mill liners, wood chips, everything that gets impregnated or becomes gold bearing during the mining processes, that's being generated on small quantities that doesn't justify the mining industry to invest capital to recover the gold from that material. And that's in essence what we've developed over the last 20 years. Different types of plants being able to recover this gold, to return value back to the mining industry, as well as retain some of that for ourselves. That actually provides a unique take on Goldplat in the sense that we are a services company, but we do have gold and PGMs exposure at the end of the day in terms of when the price fluctuates. And I see it actually increased slightly today, which is quite positive. As indicated, we also look at historical mining sites. I mean, in South Africa, gold has been mined for more than 150 years. There's a lot of areas that's currently owned either by municipalities, landowners, that's been contaminated by the mining industry in the past. We provide services whereby we clean those up and process it through our plant to recover the last bit of value. The processes we use is not necessarily unique, except for the fact we've got different types of processes on our plants in South Africa and in Ghana, giving us the flexibility to handle a lot of different types of material being generated. So in the end, what do we produce? We produce gold doré, silver doré, as well as other gravity concentrates and concentrates that contains gold or PGMs material. So stepping back to who and what Goldplat is, just a bit of key data. The share price has been moving quite nicely, and I'm sure the shareholders is excited to see that at last, increasing about 25% over the last 10 days. The share price is now at around 12p with a market cap of £20 million. We had some board changes in the last 3 months with our previous chairman, Matthew Robinson, stepping down, but we were lucky to have him replaced by Gerard Green, who has been part of the team on an executive and non-executive basis for the last 7 or 8 years. We were also joined by Gerard Kemp, that's got extensive experience in the mining industry, and both Gerard and Gerard is quite actively still involved in the mining industry, and I'm sure they're going to contribute quite a lot in terms of the growth of Goldplat going forward. We've got one major shareholder in Martin Oy, owning 28.85%. He's also a non-executive director on the board. So if we then look at Goldplat and go back to the overview again, as indicated, we aim and we have been providing a service for the mining industry for more than 30 years, even before we've been listed. And as we'll look at, when we look at the numbers a bit later, we've been doing so profitably for the last 3 to 4 years. And we, as I think what's important for me to understand from the shareholders' perspective is that as we're a services company, it's all about maintaining relationships, maintaining the services. And as the mining industry in South Africa, and specifically West Africa, where there's a lot of investment going in, so Goldplat can also grow, increase, as well as remain stable in terms of the operating profits we do generate. Apart from that, we also have quite a few nice projects. The most important one is obviously our tailings facility in South Africa, which we've built up in processing material for the last 20 years. which containing around 82,000 ounces of gold per JORC compliant resource we did on that property back in 2016. Since then, we've added material to that tailings facility, and we're currently working hard towards finalizing the solutions we've developed to process that material. If I talk about the solution, the first step is that we need to move off that facility so that we've got the ability to reprocess it. Secondly, we will need to establish a pipeline, as we've announced this morning, to DRD Gold's facilities. And once we get the approval for that and we complete the construction, we've got the ability then to actually process that material through a plant situated on their site. The terms and conditions around that still needs to be finalized, but we're quite excited about our relationship, which is quite key to Goldplat, with DRD Gold, and this really provides us with an adequate solution to process this material in the future. Something I forgot to mention of the JORC compliant resource is that it's running at a grade of 1.78 grams a ton. So it's basically a resource above ground, close to 1.8 grams a ton. And we currently estimate the recoveries around 20%, but that will vary. And we're still looking at ways of increasing that. And once we've got more specific terms, we'll be able to provide a bit more detail to the market in terms of what we can expect from that in the future. At the bottom, just to note, we still have around about 500,000 pounds worth of investment in Carical Gold PLC, which is an African-focused gold miner. And we still value this investment that was created when we ventured our assets, Kilimapesa, into Carical Gold nearly a year ago. So if we then move on, I'm not going to talk too much on the slide. Obviously, it remains important for us to be seen as, not seen as, but I mean, it's important to have being established as a trustworthy partner in the gold industry. I keep on telling our staff that's the only thing we've got. It's important that we handle all the material we get with care. And as a result, we try and follow the responsible gold guidance set out by the LBMA and gets audited according to that on a regular basis to make sure our sourcing is certified. We're also proud of the fact that our services actually provide a solution for some of the byproducts and waste that has been created by the mining industry, and providing a way of not just removing it from their site, but also to extract more value out of it, to make sure that all material mined, we recover as much as possible metal from it, and in the end, reducing the need to mine more and more. So if we then look a bit more at the numbers, as indicated, the business as a whole has been, or the recovery business as a whole has been reducing operational profits since 2018 based on various gold prices. We are, if we look at these numbers, you can see that from operating profit before finance costs, we've been generating on average between 3 to 4 million, even higher operating numbers. That obviously excludes listing costs, finance costs, and taxes. I've included the numbers up until 6 months, December 2021. That operating profit before finance cost for the 12 months, as indicated to the market, was closer to 7.8 million pounds. So the business has been growing, our market share has been increasing, and obviously we've been benefiting on a good gold price over the last couple of years. As indicated, we've got two gold recovery businesses, one situated in South Africa and one in Ghana. The two distinct differences between the two is in South Africa, we do process surface source material through carbon and leach circuits, whereby in Ghana, we only focused on actually providing solutions for current for the current mining industry. So we don't do any carbon and leach. Our focus is merely on products that's being produced on a daily basis. We have established a lot of relationships in West Africa, and the key there remains for us to try and open up more and more of West Africa. And I'll talk a little bit about South America as well now. So before we look at that, just in terms of Goldplat recovery, the key for us remains on sustainability of sourcing material at our recovery operation. Obviously, as much as we're a servicing entity, we're also a processing entity, and for that we need sources to do so. Apart from our relationships with the mining industry, I'm glad or excited more about the fact that we've been able to increase our low-grade surface source material above 5 years in terms of resource supply through arrangements made with DRD Gold. That really gives us a stable footing in terms of our operations in South Africa, and we're quite excited about increasing our market share in South Africa in terms of byproducts from current mining industry. We're continuously focusing also on diversifying in South Africa into PGMs. South Africa has got some of the largest resources in the world of PGMs, and we have been investing more and more in terms of material to process, as well as into plant to process this. Our flotation plant has been finalized towards the end of June this year. We had some teething problems, but currently the plant is starting to give us good results in terms of processing, and that really gives us a lot of flexibility, not just to process PGM material, but also to process different types of gold material through this flotation circuit. In terms of monetizing the tailings storage facility in South Africa, I've already discussed the advances we've made there in terms of the pipelines and with DRD Gold. Around, obviously, if we want to process that facility, we need to construct a new tailings facility. And I don't think the market really appreciates that the importance of actually getting approval to construct a new tailings facility. We've got the approval now. We've started to construct that facility. We believe it will take roughly around 6 months to complete. And once we move off the current facility, obviously, the plans can begin to install a pipeline and work on plans to reprocess the old facility, still depending on getting approval for that construction of pipeline from Water Affairs. If we then look at gold recovery Ghana, I'm quite happy that the plant has got the capacity to do a lot more. Just because of the nature of the material we process. We've built, as I've indicated, good, strong relationships in West Africa. And in West Africa, as much as being engaged with the mining groups and staff on the mine, it's also important to build relationships with government to make sure they're comfortable with the export processes and the processes we put in place. Specifically transparency on processing material in Ghana to allow for export of those material to our premises for processing. We continue to look at other options in West Africa. We've been quite successful in processing some material generated by artisanal type miners, and we're still engaging with government to find ways of providing that solution to industry or cleaning up tails left behind by small-scale miners. In South America, we have been active for the last 5 to 6 years in terms of sourcing material for the Ghana operation. And with the increase in the global shipping costs, we've been looking more and more to actually starting to establish a footprint in South America to enable us to process some of the lower grade material. We are finding that we see opportunity in doing so. We, however, will invest into South America on a sort of on a measured basis to make sure we don't overcapitalize. To start with, our capital will mainly be focused as we identify opportunities. We will grow our footprint there.
Okay, final minute, Werner.
Okay, that went quickly, Donald. Yes, I think, this is just the half-year numbers, and the operating profit number of around 4 million contributed to profit for the year from continuing operations for half year of 2.2 million, just to give you some perspective. We normally have quite a lot of cash on hand. At the end of December, it was 1.64 million. At the end of September this year, a month ago, we had about 3 million cash on hand, and our working capital investment is quite significantly. If you consider against our market cap of 20 million, we've got roughly 9 million invested into working capital. Then yes, for me, the exciting part of Goldplat is obviously it's cash generative. It's already producing, it's already creating cash. We are well established in the mining industry. We've got quite a big reach, and we've got opportunities to increase profits and future cash flow through strategic partnerships, through processing our tailings facility, and for diversifying into PGMs and potentially other elements as well.
Okay, Werner, thank you very much indeed for that. So why do you see yourselves as a mining services group rather than a gold recovery business? Why is mining services a more adequate description?
Donald, in the end, we're a bit of both. In the end, the mining industry in their plant processes byproducts like wood chips, mill liners, fine carbons, and we are providing a service to them in terms of removing that material and then recovering the gold, returning a percentage of that back to them and retaining part of it. So I think what's important to understand is that we are providing a service to the mining industry. We've been doing so for 20 years. So if mining industry is going to exist for the next 20 years, obviously there is need for a player like Goldplat to provide those services and extract value for the mining industry. Okay.
Mark Simpson has not just asked one question; he's actually asked multiple questions.
Yes.
But let me filter some of mine and some of Mark's. The company issued great Q1 results this morning, along with many others. I have to say, that's me saying that. But there was a large FX foreign exchange impact. Can you add a bit more color to this? Now I have my own question. Yes. So you give me your answer, then I'll take it.
Okay. Well, I think, Donald, if we look at Ghana cedi, it's depreciated over the quarter with more than 60% against the USD. In South Africa, the rand has depreciated more than 7% against the USD. Now, what is important to understand is that we're trying to, as far as possible, make sure that our cash inflows and our cash outflows sort of matches where possible. And sometimes that means we get paid on, let's say, day one. If at day one the cedi is at 8, then the conversion is at 8. If the sale is only recognized 2 weeks later and is moved to 8.5, obviously my sales is stated higher, but the cash was received at the lower exchange rate, and that results in that foreign exchange loss being recognized in our books.
So does all the Ghanaian cash stay in Ghana? Does all the South African cash stay in the South African business?
Well, I mean, obviously, if we look at the reporting, all that money coming in and going out needs to be converted at the local reporting currency. That's creating the foreign exchange losses, and we can then move that cash around. Even if, I mean, it doesn't mean everything gets converted into CD or into Rand, but it's being accounted in that way.
Okay. Okay. And Mark Simpson. In a previous interview, you implied that share buybacks may be preferred to dividends due to the low share price. I remember that interview.
Yeah.
Is this still the case? Because as you say yourself, you are throwing off cash.
Yes. Well, I think, Donald, I mean, obviously, if we look at it, our cash balance has been stable at around £3 million over the recent past. I've indicated this morning that we do have some capital investments in the group that we needed to make. To date, for the 3 months, roughly £600,000. We're planning another 1.5 million as a minimum, I guess, for the next 12 to 18 months, just as normal repair and maintenance and requirements from the tailings in environmental perspective. We also do have some facilities we need to settle, specifically in South Africa. So I think for me, what is important is that it's not a question of whether we do share buybacks or whether we do dividends. We first need to make sure that we are comfortable to declare value out to shareholders, whether it's share buybacks, whether it's dividends. And if that is, at that point in time, we need to assess, well, what do we believe is going to be the best for shareholders? The share price might change. Obviously, that's a big factor on whether we are willing to buy back shares and we think shareholders is going to get value from that. So that's really what you assess on the specific day. But in terms of returning value to shareholders, I think the nature of our business has indicated in the past, that's something we definitely will look at doing.
Okay, let's move on to DRD Gold. Now, is it possible just to ask a broad brush question? Who are DRD Gold and what's your relationship with them? How does that all work? Because clearly they're quite important to you now, and presumably you are to them.
Yes, I think, I mean, obviously DRD Gold is quite a bigger gold processing company than what Goldplat is. They mainly focused on South Africa, and they process large volumes of previously mined tailings through their operations. Obviously, the shareholders can go and Google, they are listed and get all the detail. But yes, I mean, they've got the ability to process tailings material. They've got the capacity to process tailings material at high volumes, reducing the cost of processing that material. So from that perspective, obviously, they are key. They also cover large footprints of areas around where our plant in South Africa is situated, giving us the ability to also give them solutions in terms of processing material that is maybe not specifically earmarked for their service.
So you could have a collaborative arrangement with them, you think?
Yes.
A partnership type arrangement.
Exactly.
Okay, how fantastic. Where does the pipeline fit in? Forgive me for being naive. I can't quite see how the pipeline fits into a tailings recovery process.
Yeah, I think, I mean, Donald, obviously we're talking about close to 2 million tons by now, if not more. And that needs to be transferred from our area to where the plant is that we plan to process that material. There's two ways of doing it. Obviously, one is through trucking that material. 2 million tons is a lot of material to truck. And then there's certain decisions you need to make in terms of cost per ton, whether it makes sense to truck or to pump. Pump is definitely a cheaper option, firstly. And secondly, if you want to truck, you need to allow the dump to dry out.
Your tailings are in fairly liquid form, are they?
Well, yes. I mean, obviously they contain a lot of moisture, and it will take some time to dry out before you can get to a point where you can track that material. So from that point of view, having a pipeline in place makes a lot more sense.
Great. Okay. Okay. So back to Mark Simpson. Give us some more detail on the challenges you faced on the PGM recovery side, and when can you expect these to be fully resolved?
Yes, I think obviously we constructed a flotation plant. A flotation plant is quite a unique system. We also made use of unique flotation technology, and I think in the beginning it was just a question of trying to marry our current circuit with the flotation plant. It's not a big circuit. We tend to have smaller circuits than what you'll find in industry just because of the nature of the material we process. Because it changes so much, we want to batch process it. And once you start taking plants, trying to make them smaller, trying to utilize them on smaller quantities, it just becomes a bit more tricky to make sure you've got everything running optimally. I'm not going to go into all the detail in terms of all the variables that necessarily is at play, whether it's density, etc. But that was some of the challenges. But we're seeing a lot of improvement, which is encouraging.
Okay. Back to the pipeline. Presumably there's a capex cost for the pipeline, and
yes.
who might be, is that a sort of 50-50 split between you and DRD Gold, or
yes.
how might that work?
Well, I think, I mean, in the end, as indicated, the terms between us and DRD still needs to be finalized.
Indeed.
There will be a significant capital spent in terms of the pipeline. The positive is that on the other side, there is already infrastructure. We don't need to go and build a new plant from scratch. So that also has its benefit. So whether we need to contribute to that, whether we pay for everything, I think that is that's already been factored in terms of the whole project, but that's not a concern.
Okay, now news flow. Final question. It's 6 minutes past 8. Sadly, we are out of time. Last question. News flow. What can we expect from Goldplat in terms of news flow in the coming months? Always a good question to end on.
Yes, I mean, obviously, we still have our annual results that needs to come out. We're planning to get that out around beginning of December for the year end of 30 June. Then we're obviously we're starting the construction on our tailings facility, and we'll keep the market informed in terms of what that progress is. Obviously, from maybe everything won't go out to the market, but for me, what is going to be key and exciting is obviously trying to get more material out of West Africa, getting the PGM circuit to sync properly with the rest of the plant and starting to see the results from that. And also then looking at increasing our market share in South Africa, which we're working quite hard on. It's probably the stuff that for me is key for the next 6 months.
Werner Klingenberg, thank you so much for joining us from Johannesburg this evening. Thank you. That was absolutely fantastic. And that's it from us after another great evening. I'd like to say special thanks to Red Cloud Financial Services, the Canadian broker, who as ever connect us to such high quality mining companies in Canada. It really is a treat to hear from these people. And don't forget, if you'd like to invest in Canadian stocks, you can do so on the interactive investor trading platform, or get in touch with us if you know anybody else who provides the facility. We'd love to know. Finally, a huge thanks to you once again for being such a great audience, and we look forward to doing it all over again on December the 6th. Good night and enjoy the rest of your evening.